maybe not. Okay, welcome everybody to the October 21st, 2025 Winnetka Village Council regular meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. And please mute your cell phones and other electronic devices so we don't interrupt proceedings. Okay. And I'll ask Manager Kazinas to do a roll call for attendance.
Trustee Albinson.
Here.
Trustee Orsick.
Here.
Trustee Myers.
Here.
Trustee Apatoff.
Here.
Trustee Dahlman.
Oh. Trustee Handler has provided the required notice that she is unable to attend tonight's meeting due to work obligations. Our rules provide that Trustee Handler may participate remotely unless 2/3 of the board objects. Is there any objection to Trustee Handler participating? No? Okay. Hearing none, Trustee Handler may now participate remotely fully in the meeting, and the minutes should so reflect.
Trustee Handler.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Myers, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
And to for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, we'll move on to item 3, which is a quorum check. Kristen, will you do a quorum check, please?
Yes, our next meeting is the all-day budget review meeting on October 30th. And then our November meetings, November 4th regular meeting. We've canceled the November 11th study session and then November 18th regular meeting.
Everybody? Terrific. Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, public comments. I'll ask if anyone in the audience would like to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda. And just as a reminder, please respect our 3-minute limit for public comments in accordance with council policy. Would anyone like to make public comment tonight? Come on up.
Bob, it's on the agenda, but it's on the consent agenda.
That's okay, Warren. Come on up. That's fine.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Warren James. I'm here to address the Village Council regarding Agenda Item 7C, Resolution R74-2025, approving change order number 1 to the contract with DeMeo Brothers. I urge you to remove the item from the consent agenda and explain to the public why the village is recommending a change order, an amount that is more than 1.5 times the cost of the original contract. On June 17, 2025, the Village of Winnetka approved Resolution R49-2025, approving a contract with DeMeo Brothers for construction services for the Elder Storm Outfall Replacement Project. The contract was awarded to DeMeo, even though Northern Divers was the lowest bidder by more than 5%. Resolution R49-2025 reads in part as follows. The Village Council desires to enter into a contract with the contractor for the provision of the services from contractor in an amount not to exceed $119,000. Let me repeat that, not to exceed $119,000. Tonight, the village is considering Resolution R74-2025, a resolution approving a change order for an amount of $197,250. The proposed change order is 165% of the original contract amount, bringing the total cost of the work to $316,250. The rationale for awarding the change order reads as follows. Various unexpected issues arose as the contractor attempted to complete the project, including unexpected and challenging field conditions that require the use of specialized hydro jetting system and the design and installation of a new anchoring system to secure the storm sewer of the pier. The very reason why we enter into contracts is to transfer risk. This was not a cost-plus agreement. Here's some additional facts. DeMeo subcontracted the work to the low bidder, Northern Divers. That should give you pause. The nature of the work in Lake Michigan, in a confined space, under the pier, oftentimes underwater, was well understood by all parties. The fact that sand infiltrated the pipe and the pier was clear, all that was clear from the pictures of the existing conditions. The fact that the 77-year-old 3x8 timbers were no longer viable to secure the new pipe should have been evident to DeMeo. So I ask you, And also, there was a mandatory pre-bid conference. I urge you not to award the additional change order and ask you, if you had known that the cost was $316,000, would you have awarded this to DeMayo in the first place? It's especially sad because the Park District has had an application before you since September of 2024 and offered to pay for the relocation of that pipe. And that permit was never acted upon.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Warren. Thank you. Other public comment tonight? Come on up.
President Dearborn, trustees, thanks for letting me speak.
Of course.
I was planning on just coming up and by myself, but I have a dozen others here around the community.
Terrific.
That are with me, and this
Terrific.
is, in essence, a sense of what community is all about for what you've established, so thank you for that. I'm going to apologize in advance because you're going to see me head out shortly after this because I'm solo this week and I've got dinner and homework to get the kids prepared for. But I did want to.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Ben Dietz. That would help first, wouldn't
Thank you,
it?
Ben.
I'm on live off of Euclid Avenue here.
Great. Thank you.
So first, let me acknowledge that I know you're handed an abundance of asks and complaints. My day job is I can relate. So let me at first tell you that thank you for making this community best in class. I come here as a dad, as a neighbor, and a daily bike commuter. Recently, my son was struck by a car near our home at Willow in Berkeley, and he is okay. It's an amazing thing. We're profoundly fortunate for that. The support that we received underscores the special community that you've helped build. I mean, my next piece is about the community, and they happened to show up, and I was not expecting that. So we live in a place where people look out for one another, and where walking and biking aren't just practical, they're part of who we are. My kids and many in this community walk and bike to practices, to friends' houses, to school, and to the train. And the village schools actively nurture that culture, from the annual Bike Winnetka ride to the bike rodeos the Winnetka Police help run in our elementary schools. These are not just events, they signal how we want our children to move through this community safely, confidently, and together. The Futures 2040 plan builds on that identity. It emphasizes enhancing bicycle pedestrian connectivity, safety, and comfort, especially along our key east-west routes and those paths that link the schools, parks, and our neighborhoods. Tonight, I'm asking to carry out that vision in one specific place, Willow Road certainly, but in this particular, the intersection of Berkeley and Willow. If you cross that area during rush hour, you know how it feels. Even when I'm coming back from the train on my bike and I'm standing on my pedals, it's hard to see over cars, and it's very difficult for cars that are coming the other way to actually see a pedestrian that's at the curb. This isn't just any corner, it is the crosswalk and the gateway to the Crow Island Woods and the historic Schmidt-Burnham Log House, places we encourage families to visit. It's also a link for students moving between neighborhoods and schools like Skokie and Washburn. In short, it's exactly the type of community connection that the plan that you have says we should protect. I recognize Willow is a busy artery with many demands, and I'm not here to ask for a stop sign that could only impede for traffic even further. What I am asking is that we do provide treatment that meets the moment. So my ask is that if we can please install what you're certainly going to know more about than myself, but in my research is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at the Willow and Berkeley crosswalk. The research.
Ben, we're at 3 minutes. If you
Okay,
could finish
well.
up. Thank you.
So the main ask is that with this area, the education that we do within our community, I'd like the education works best when the street itself sends the same safety message as the education that we're providing one another. So my ask is that I'm happy to provide any support. I'll rally folks around for data collection. You want me to go out and collect more names. If there's any fundraising that's necessary, you just tell me where you need me to get this done.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate that very much. Thank you. Other public comment tonight? Come on up.
Good evening, Council. Vince Pelleriti. I live at 979 Elm Street. I know Ben very well. That crosswalk area poses significant concern for a lot of the parents in the community. We strongly support any mitigation efforts that the village can provide there. We understand that there may be an IDOT thing to facilitate that, but we would ask that the village administrator, with your support, strongly support whatever mitigation efforts we can provide there. Kids are being injured. The village has recently passed an e-scooter measure, which we understand, we all support. It was in accordance with Illinois state law, but we had also recognized that Berkeley Willow Road intersection poses just as much safety risk for the kids who are going to Crow Island, to and from Crow Island, to Skokie School, to Washburn, to Skokie Playfields. So we're just asking for the same consideration from the village trustees as the e-scooter prohibition. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. On this topic, message delivered and received. We appreciate it.
And Bob, there's another hot spot, which is a lot of correspondence on too.
All right. Other public comment? No other public comment? Okay, thank you all for coming. For whatever reason you're here, we appreciate it. We'll close public comment and move on to reports. And we'll start with trustees. We'll start at this end. Trustee Myers.
No report.
Okay, Trustee Apatow.
No report tonight.
Trustee Dahlman.
No report.
Trustee Orsick.
No report.
Trustee Albinson.
No report.
Trustee Handler.
Just a short report, which Kristen may mention. Last weekend at the farmers market, we made it a special day. It was Meet the New Village Manager, and we had a lot of people come to the table and say hello, new faces, which is always exciting to see.
Great, thank you for that, Kim. It was terrific. Village Attorney.
No report tonight.
Village Manager.
No report.
Okay, Village President, I do have a report, and I want to report on two meetings that I arranged over the past couple of months. One of the participants is here with us tonight, which I appreciate, and these two meetings were held last week. The first meeting was with the presidents of our sister Winnetka jurisdictions, including Gene Hahn, president of the New Trier High School District Board, Elise Gibson, who's here tonight, president of the Winnetka Park District Board, Laura Freechak, president of the Winnetka Northfield Library District Board, and we would have had Dan Waters, president of District 36 Board, but Dan had a last-minute travel conflict and was unable to join. We met right here in council chambers last Wednesday morning and had an excellent discussion on priorities of each group, the importance of having open lines of communication between village officials and respective staffs, and the value of working together collaboratively whenever possible. So it was a really fruitful meeting, in my opinion. It covered a number of topics, and it's just good that everybody has open lines of communication with the others, not just with me, but with the other people, and they get to know each other, which is terrific. The second meeting was also held in these chambers last Friday with the presidents of our several contiguous communities, including Wilmette, Senta Plunkett, Kenilworth Village President Cecily Kaz, Glencoe Village President Howard Royne, and Northfield Village President Tracy Mendrek. Again, the purpose of getting together was to establish good and open communication lines, let the others know our respective priorities, and always be aware of how we might be able to work together where appropriate. The takeaway, I think, is that amongst those communities, while we're all distinct, we have our own characteristics, we all share certain challenges in common, such as infrastructure, rising costs of capital projects, down in the weed projects like lead lines. I mean, it's all, and it's good to have that conversation. So it was really terrific to have those people all together. And for both groups, we're scheduling subsequent meetings. The next meeting amongst the village presidents will be, where is that, Elise? It's at New Trier. It's at New Trier. And with the village presidents, it's going to be in Wilmette. And so hopefully this will continue on, and there will be some tangible benefits, you know, in some shape or form down the road. So that was, we'll keep this going, but that was, those were both excellent get-togethers, and I'm happy that I think the reception, at least correspondence back, was pretty darn good. So happy about that. We'll move on to item 6, establishment of the consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove any item on the consent agenda for a separate vote? Anyone? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
And that's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. We'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda, and Manager Kazinas will read each item.
Approval of the warrant list dated October 3rd, 2025 to October 16, 2025 in the amount of $741,590.48. Ordinance number M14, 2025, authorizing the disposition of surplus personal property owned by the Village of Winnetka for introduction and adoption. Resolution number R74, 2025, approving a change order number 1 to the contract with DeMayo Brothers Incorporated for construction services for the Elder Storm Sewer Outfall Replacement Project for adoption. Resolution number R79, 2025, waiving bidding requirements and authorizing the purchase of 3 village vehicles for 2025 for adoption. Resolution number R80, 2025, approving an agreement with GSG Consultants Incorporated for retaining wall design and construction services for adoption.
Thank you, Kristen. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
Second.
And that is a roll call vote.
Trustee Myers? Trustee Myers?
Yes.
Trustee Apatoff?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
Trustee Orsick?
Yes.
Trustee Alvinson?
Yes.
Trustee Handler?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. We move on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions. We have none. Item 9, discussion. 9A, Tower Court Condos Concept Review. Tonight, council will consider a plan development concept plan application for a 4-story mixed-use development in Hubbard Woods. And our Assistant Community Development Director, Ann Clausen, is here to present. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, President Dearborn. Good evening, trustees. This evening, I will briefly review the plan development process, the general site information, as well as the subdivision and zoning relief that has been identified to date, in addition to the plan development approval. The plan development process consists of 3 major public review steps. We are currently at the first of the 3 public review steps, the concept plan review. At the concept plan review stage, an applicant presents its concept plan. Council members may make any comments or suggestions, and any views expressed are only preliminary and advisory and simply individual views of council members. So there's no binding action that is taken. If the applicant should choose to move forward with the development, they would then submit the preliminary plan development application. There would be public hearings before each of the advisory bodies, the Design Review Board and the Plan Development Commission, and all of these meetings are open to the public. Then, if the council should approve a preliminary plan development, the applicant would need to submit all the necessary documents for final plan approval. Moving to the site itself, the property, which does consist of 4 parcels, is located on the east side of Green Bay Road between Tower and Gage. Tower Court does run along the rear of the property. The existing buildings on the site are a mix of commercial, mixed use, and residential buildings. Current commercial tenants of the various buildings include Rebel House Design, Red Spade, Bellevue Bridal, Alexandra Kaler Design, Munder Skiles, and Europa Motors. The existing buildings would be demolished in order to accommodate this proposed development. Demolition permits would therefore need to be submitted and reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. The comprehensive plan designates the property as appropriate for commercial and mixed-use land uses. In terms of the zoning, the site is split between D, light industrial, and C2, general retail commercial, with the portion along Green Bay Road located in the commercial overlay district. So a map amendment would also be required to rezone the 1007 Tower Court parcel and a portion of the 901-905 Green Bay Road parcel to C2 General Retail. In terms of the plan itself, the applicant's project includes commercial space measuring approximately 15,000 square feet, residential units currently proposed at approximately 15 units, on-site parking, 36 spaces, 7 of which would be at the ground or street level, 29 underground parking spaces. Now we'll briefly review the development in terms of the zoning relief that has been identified. Once the applicant submits a preliminary plan development application and more detailed information is provided, additional relief may be identified at that point. So in addition to the plan development approval, a plat of consolidation will be necessary as the site consists of 4 parcels. In terms of zoning specifics, the maximum permitted height is 45 feet and 4 stories. The applicant is proposing a 4-story building that would be 62 feet to the top of the penthouse. Now, building levels that are at the 4th floor and higher are required to be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the front property line. The applicant is currently proposing a setback at the 4th level from portions along Green Bay that would be less than the 10 feet. Regarding the height in the upper story setback, I'll let the applicant address the aspects of their design. In terms of setbacks, a maximum front yard setback of 3 feet is required. The applicant proposes a building setback of more than 3 feet along portions of the Green Bay property line. No side yard is required. When one is provided, it must be a minimum of 3 feet. The applicant is proposing that portions of the building would be set back less than 3 feet along just portions of that northerly property line. And then in terms of the ground level parking, a special use permit will be required for that. Parking exception. The proposed plan includes the 36 spaces, 7, like we mentioned, at street level, and then the 29 in the lower level for the residential condo owners. The 7 spaces at the street level, and I know the applicant will explain this in more detail, are intended for guest use and commercial tenants, but the lower level are for the condo owners. As represented on this image, they are representing that there could be an additional 27 tandem-style parking spaces if a residential unit owner would choose extra parking over storage space. Now, in terms of what is actually required by village code, 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of net gross floor area for the commercial space is required. A calculation of the commercial gross floor area will be completed once we have more detailed plans, but based on the concept plan that has been submitted to date, they are required to provide 31 on-site spaces. Now, with respect to the residential units, the code does require 1 1/4 spaces for 1-bedroom units, 1 1/2 spaces for 2-bedroom units, and then 2 spaces for 3-bedroom units. The applicant is estimating 15 residential units. The size of the units has not been specified. However, if all 15 units contain 3 bedrooms, the resulting required parking is 30 on-site spaces. So therefore, as currently proposed, the development requires a minimum of 61 on-site parking spaces. The applicant has identified Rebel House as a commercial tenant along Green Bay Road. Given this space is located within the overlay district, it would require special use permit approval. Now, you may recall in 2020, the Village Council did approve a special use permit to allow Rebel House to occupy its current location. The special use permit is not transferable. Therefore, to occupy this new commercial space, they will have to apply for and receive approval to occupy that space along Green Bay Road. When a plan development is requesting exceptions, zoning exceptions, the applicant is to demonstrate compensating benefits associated with the proposed development. The applicant has identified 6 compensating benefits that are included on page 14 of the application materials, 3 of which are identified here. I'll, of course, let the applicant explain these in more detail. After hearing from the applicant this evening, members of the council are asked to provide individual comments, suggestions, or recommendations on the proposed mixed-use development. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff, or wait until after you hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Ann. I think maybe we hear from the applicant first, or what do people think? Is that okay? Why don't we hear from the applicant? We'll come back to you, Ann.
Sure. Let me just do a little text switching here.
There it is. We know this guy.
You thought you got rid of me.
Hello, John.
In January. Hello, everyone. My name is John Talty, and I am very thankful to be back standing in front of all you folks. There's a lot to unpack here, but before we get started, let me introduce the rest of the team. From OKW, our design director, Neil Songroth, is with us tonight. Todd Eltunian and Peter Whitmer, who are fundamentally the developers of this property. Todd is a very skilled general contractor from Lake Forest, and Peter is an equally skilled architect from Lake Forest. Together, they've done quite a bit of this type of building and are anxious and looking forward to some commentary and some positive feedback from the Village of Winnetka regarding this site on Green Bay Road. This is going to be a change for Hubbard Woods. I preface all this as, you know, as I've said in the past, I'm not only an architect, I'm a resident of this community, and I hold it very near and dear to my heart. So the decisions that we make as a collective and the process that we take, I think, you know, needs to be carefully attended to. And I know that's going to be the case with what we're doing here. I'm going to get through all this stuff. You know all the things there is to know about us. I want to talk about the property itself. This is a different kind of opportunity for our community. This is a for sale product. And as Ann described, you know, somewhere in the range of ultimately, you know, maybe 12 to 16 residential units on floors 2, 3, and 4, with a ground floor that would be commercially oriented, including retailers, restaurants. You know, there is, as we've discovered with our friends across the street, across the train tracks, there is a demand to be in this community from the commercial and retail world, and we're thankful for that. So the ground floor would be respectful of all of that. It will hold the edge of Green Bay Road. It will play nicely with its neighboring buildings, and its architecture will be eclectic, much like the architecture of Hubbard Woods itself. We have not figured everything out as it pertains to this opportunity. It's reflected in the package that you've all received. We've given it a great deal of thought, however. We want to be mindful of the building's mass, and it's the erosion of that mass, as we have talked about in projects past, and we want to be a good neighbor and a good catalyst for future opportunity in Hubbard Woods. It's a mid-block opportunity with a driveway, a proposed driveway, heading one-way east from Green Bay Road to Tower Court behind. We think that this opportunity provides the village a great chance to rethink that corridor running behind all of that commercial space, running parallel to Green Bay Road and adjacent to the railroad tracks. The intention of this project is to enliven and to activate that corridor, not tamp it down. We think that this is a great first step to make that a much more pedestrian-friendly, much more intentional vehicular corridor than it is right now. Currently, it's a parking lot for a bunch of cars that are in disrepair. And the hope is that we clean all that stuff up and we provide order back there, we provide intentional design, and we make that a safe haven for people to commute on the rail, to get down to the parking garage, to access the park, in a different but similar way than the sidewalks along Green Bay Road. So, you know, the building itself, again, is a 4-story structure. It's intended to be built out of concrete. And through building methodologies, that concrete structure will fundamentally be a column-free building. So the residences on 2, 3, and 4, it's just an open plan. And purchasers, and Todd and Peter can explain this in far greater detail than I, because they've done this before, but purchasers can come in and demise those floors how they see fit. And they can take as much or as little space as they would like for their residences. The intentions are for these to be much larger, starting north of 3,000 square feet. They have one of their units in their one of their Lake Forest projects. One of their units is 9,000 square feet. So there are purchasers out there, and there are those who want this type of living, and they want to determine and dictate what that living environment is like. I may be a traditional person, but my next door neighbor may be a modernist. I was explaining to Rob in advance of all this. And so I can have my traditional condominium, and my neighbor can have an equally lovely, housing environment in a much more modern aesthetic. So each of these are going to be custom units for the purchasers ultimately down the road. But we are, for purposes of this exercise, we demised the building footprints in such a way to offer some practical way as to how this could play out. That doesn't mean that people couldn't conjoin units, make them bigger, make them slightly smaller, but the intent is for these to be bespoke units to a very, very limited group of individuals who will live in this building and own in this building. That front door to these units is the intention of the front door is to be off of Green Bay Road and down that alley that sits along the southern edge of this building footprint. There's an intentionality to that. We're taking the residents off the street and giving them their own kind of entry point and not competing with the commercial corridor that is Green Bay Road. Again, we hope to activate that in a very appropriate way for the community. And so we're getting people off of Green Bay Road to their front door, and ultimately at the southeast corner of the building to the driveway, which will lead to the parking below grade. It's better reflected here. I apologize. So we have a ground floor of demisable retail that's about 15,400 feet. Rebel House is already engaged into an agreement with Altunian to become a tenant in this building. There are other conversations being had with existing tenants right now. It is not our intention to displace everybody. It's our intention to provide people new opportunity if they so desire. And so as a result, Todd and Peter have been dealing with all the property owners. It's been a very, very complex dance, as you could well imagine, in trying to assemble all of this stuff. And, back in July 29th, we sat down with a few of you, thankfully, and kind of presented, just kind of threw the idea out as to whether or not this could be an opportunity for our village. The resultant of that is the package you have before you tonight, and the conversation that we're about to have. So, as I said, the architecture of this building, here's our Green Bay Road elevation. We haven't established really what the architecture, we haven't finalized the architecture by any stretch of the imagination. We're showing it in context here with the adjacent properties. The right side of this represents that proposed drive aisle back to the east side of the site. But again, the ground floor, commercial space, a 14-foot floor-to-floor height to the second floor. Given the structure and the way we're proposing to build this building, that would allow commercial tenants to have upwards of 13 feet of space to work with on their ground floor. The residents, much the same on 2, 3, and 4. We have a 12-foot floor-to-floor height. That could result in an 11-foot high finished ceiling in those spaces. So this is grand living in a grand suburban community. And then ultimately there's a penthouse on top that we've proposed right now, which for owners of fourth floor units, there was the thought that maybe we could provide access to the roof so that they could use it as a roof garden for their specific use only for those tenants that are on the fourth floor. So it privatized roof gardens. So that's what that penthouse is all about. That's what that structure is all about on the roof. There would be an elevator override for sure, but this is offering more than that. So, the architecture, as Neil and I have, and Peter and Todd, as we've all kind of tried to address it, we look around the Hubbard Woods context, and we look at the buildings, ranging from Walgreens, to the Tudor buildings that sit aside, and like much of Winnetka, there's not a single voice here. There's many voices. The idea would be that this is a stone and brick building, a four-sided building with architecture equally placed all the way around, because every side is really is a unit looking out to the neighboring spaces north, south, east, and west. So there's no subordinated architecture here. There's no Main Street elevation, and the rest is all kind of something else. This is a building that has to live on four sides. It's going to be visible. This elevation is going to be very visible from Green Bay Road as I head south, or as I head north, to Tower Road. All you have to do is drive that corridor now, and you look at the backside of the auto repair space, the tower that sits there, which is almost identical to the 50 feet of height that's plus or minus that's being proposed for the main mass of this building. You see how visible that whole thing is. Our intent is to show that building in a much more graceful and elegant way as one heads north on Green Bay Road. So that this south elevation of the building, for those looking north, is really important to the success of this. And it's reflecting the front door of the people who live there. So it's a different type of living circumstance. It's a luxury living circumstance. Our hopes are to not only activate the street, but to draw people off the street back to the front door of the residential building, and as well as using in this case, a kind of an arcade along the south side of the building to help enhance potential tenants inside the space at that corner of the building. And so we look to you guys for some direction tonight and some feedback as to whether or not the thesis is sound. There is a tremendous demand for this type of housing in this community. There are 323 names on the list for One Winnetka for 59 residential units. That's a rental. So that is so far exceeded the hope and dreams of that development when we first began kicking it around. The retail, but for 1,100 square feet, is completely taken. So we know that there's people in these communities who want to live like this. And and we're not looking for everybody. We're looking for a select few. Todd and Peter have had a number of Winnetka residents move to Lake Forest to their product up there because there's nothing for them here. Our hope is to keep our residents local and to serve the need of these folks and provide a beautiful asset and kickstart a corridor in Hubbard Woods, I think, that could really benefit from all of this. I know that the streetscape is anticipated to be kind of moved north, and the streetscape improvements. This again is part of that, domino effect of making a lot of that happen between the streetscape on Green Bay Road, the Tower Court improvements. I think this asset would be tremendous. And it's also important to know that I think there's 9 residences currently on these 4 properties. So we may only be adding 5 or 6 more than currently exist. So for people to say, well, this is a traffic generator, or this is, I think this is going to provide much less traffic and intensity of use as the current tenants we have right now, kind of force upon the site. Most of all, the auto repair on the east side of the property. So I'm happy to go through all of this in much greater detail if you wish. I will dive as deeply as any of you want me to dive. Any of the rest of us will happily participate, but I think the purpose of this, which I think is an awesome opportunity for us and others, is to really get feedback from the community.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks.
Why don't we, before we get into questions, can we just have the 2 property owners just briefly introduce yourselves and give us a little history of where you come from, who you are, what you've done, and so on?
Sure. I'm Peter Whitmer. I currently have an architecture firm in Lake Forest. I've been practicing there for, I hate to say it, I think 32 years. We have, Todd, I'll let him speak to himself, but we met about 30 years ago when I started my firm, and we have been working together for about 30 years. About 10 years ago, we were doing a development for another developer and said, maybe we should try this and do this ourselves because I think we could do a better job. And we really came upon this. His parents were aging. There was really, they really weren't able to stay in their house any longer, but there really wasn't anything available for them that fit their needs. So we came up with this concept. Well, I would say on another project that we worked on, we ended up doing out the condos, and then when we finished them, tear everything out because they didn't meet the needs of really what people were looking for. So we really, the unique qualities of Todd being not only a carpenter, but having a full mill shop, myself being an architect, was really to custom design each unit for each person. So that's been really the success, and we're really able to keep residents in the local area here, because really the people that are here, they're here for their grandkids, they're here for their clubs, their religious, their things, and they want to stay in the area, but they, just really can't stay in their houses. So that's been, that's what we see the opportunity here.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Todd?
Hi, Todd Elshunian. Grew up here in the North Shore, actually up in Lake Forest. Been in the business basically since I've grown up, but have worked up and down the North Shore, and we've done quite a bit of stuff over the years here in Winnetka. But we're originally a family-owned business, and As Peter kind of said, we started to kind of get into the development side of it, and our backgrounds are custom home, custom condo type multifamily. And so this has really kind of been suited well for, what Peter and I are kind of aligned with. We've just found that people, as Peter was saying and John has said, people really like to have the customization of a unit, and they can do it in what they want. So we're basically giving them, instead of buying an empty lot, you're buying four walls of the configuration and space needed, and then build out what you want. We're excited. We've had a ton of interest. As Peter said, and John said, we had a few people buy in our units up in Lake Forest, but we've had numerous groups of people say, hey, if this is Winnetka, sign me up. And we've already kind of gotten calls of that nature already. So we know that the demand is there for the product.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for that. Why don't we open this up for any questions at the moment, not discussion points, but questions for any of the parties, including Ann Clausen, who spoke. Scott, you want to start?
Yep. John, can you clarify the penthouse? So typically think of a penthouse as a living space. You refer to it as a kind of a garden for people on the 4th floor.
The penthouse, the way we're envisioning this, and Todd and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but the penthouse is simply a vehicle to get on the roof so that someone could have a garden space, an outdoor space on the roof of the building. It's not a livable environment. It's access more than, I think that's probably the easiest and simplest way to describe it. It's access to the roof from a custom unit only on the 4th floor.
So the size of that, the setback,
It would
is
all
kind of
be
it's all
predetermined.
arbitrary, yeah.
It would all be predetermined. We would
Yeah.
put the parameters, we would establish parameters for how that roof could be engaged by the public in terms of putting tables and chairs up there, in terms of putting they have, all kinds of people might put all kinds of amenities up there,
Sure.
but it would all be outdoor kind of centric.
Okay, okay,
Other questions?
And it's not for public consumption, Scott.
got it.
At all.
Yep.
Other questions? Yeah.
Were you going down, or?
No, you could, whatever. Go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead. I don't want to jump.
Couple things. I think this is really intriguing. I like the thought that, you're going for broader, bigger spaces versus trying to do one bedroom and really increasing. So after you talked to me about how you were looking at filling these, it's pretty intriguing. I think it's a great example of private property, using private property for residential, of repurposing clutter and some areas to really, and I think, take a good advantage of it. I really do like the way you're talking about that tower, whatever we call it, tower court, that alley. I've always thought that could be a much better use of land, better lit, better maintained, and a real pressure release valve from Green Bay Road, because it gets busy there. And we got to figure that out with Walgreens and what else is going on. There's just too much going on, but I think that whole thing needs to be looked at to be repurposed, and the outlet coming onto Gage is going to have to be figured
For
out
sure.
too. The height, I got to figure out. I mean, you're talking 14 feet for retail, and then 12-foot ceilings,
12-foot floor to floor.
floor to floor. So
Right.
it means you
Could
probably
be-
get 11.
Yes, this is not a stick-built building, this would be concrete, so it
Yeah.
allows the structure, the floor-to-floor structure, or underside of ceiling to floor finish above, to be a much tighter sandwich.
Yeah, I think it's good. I got to figure out the size. I know you're doing some step back. You don't want to do the full step backs that you want some relief from that, I believe.
I think that remains to be seen.
Okay.
Rob, because again, as we've gotten into the building, one of the selling points of this building and the successes of this building will be born of the fact that as a unit owner, I will not only have a beautiful indoor space, but I'm going to have a very livable outdoor space.
Yeah.
So every unit, it is critical that we create livable outdoor spaces through patios on each floor for each unit that are befitting of that kind of living. So the thing is going to be carved in a variety of ways.
Yeah. And that's going to be key, how you fit in with the.
Correct.
You don't want to be the, I see where it's happened in other communities where you have mass and you have something that sticks out like it's not even a part of the community. So I look forward to seeing that. The mass has got to figure out. I'm not saying I don't agree with giving some exceptions. I just look at it in size and relation with the other buildings and how it will fit. But I think it overall positive, yeah.
So I'm going to have a lot of questions.
It's okay. I'm ready for you, Tina.
Because I didn't get a chance to see it before. One of the concerns I have is I love the project. I think it will be fantastic, but just very specifically, when we are looking at doing streetscape on Green Bay in this corridor, one of the big projects, as I believe, is the water main. So is that a concern? Because I think we're scheduled to rebuild that water main all the way down Green Bay. Is it large enough? Do you know the size? That was an issue at One Winnetka early on.
Correct. I can't answer that right now. I don't
Okay.
know that.
Just flagging
But know that there are, as in all the reports that have come back from staff,
Yeah.
we know that there's a lot of issues here that need a lot, quite a bit of attention, that being one of them.
Okay.
Finding a home for the transformer would be another one.
Always a problem. And so that means that fire and police will have to weigh
Yes.
in about the circulation off of Green Bay. Okay. I'm probably going to be the only one up here that's going to say, did you think about coming with slightly higher going so that maybe we could get more parking? I'm a little bit concerned that the parking is going to be light, especially if you're looking at a restaurant as a potential first floor user. Was that ever discussed with staff, or was that just right off the bat, we're going to try to keep it at the same height of the existing tower? What is that tower for? I'm so curious.
It's a lift, I think, to get automobiles back in the day
Right.
up in the upper floors, right? So that was the tower that received all the equipment up there to get cars upstairs.
Yeah. I mean, my comment on this is again, I know I'm going to be the minority on this, but a step back, additional level that could help the developer perhaps put more parking underground to serve, because I think the parking is already really tight there. If you put another restaurant use, which I'll love because I can walk to, is going to put, I think, stress on the corridor and with the parking garage, given just what Walgreens looks like already. But maybe if we look at an aerial and shows what the ROPA more, like, they park a lot of cars on Tower Court, and I'm not sure how much spaces will become available off of Tower Court, if we're taking some of the tenants and putting them underground.
I think a lot will. And I think to that point too, when we began this process, there was always the consideration that if there were to be a restaurant, let's say on the southwest corner of this
Yeah.
building, that there would be an opportunity for cars to pull off of Green Bay, valet their car.
Right.
The valet takes it to the deck and returns it accordingly.
Yeah, but
And
but the problem is that on a given Friday or Saturday night, Minos and Domino's, and, because Domino's runs, like
Yep.
10 or 20 drivers up there. There's not a lot of extra parking. And so, it's a comment for my fellow trustees as well, is that, let's think about, I know we don't like going up higher, but if you did a step back and you got some additional parking, that might help things. It's just,
Understood.
I know I'm going to be the minority who wants to go higher. The only other comment I would share is, and so when you come back to us, if you decide to move forward, is to show that parking count of how many of the existing 9 residents, I think you said, as well as the businesses, where they're parking now. Because my gut is.
On the street.
Yeah,
All
that's
of
my
them.
gut, yeah. So that might help. And then my only other comment was, for Rebel House, and it's a lovely business. We approved that in 2020 because we had a high vacancy rate. And, you know, it doesn't bring in a lot of foot traffic. It doesn't really have much activity there. And so my only concern is you'd be coming forward with a special use permit to allow a non-retail or restaurant use, well, I guess it's all retail use, in the overlay. And, you know, I'm kind of thinking about that because that's a prime location on the street front for there's not a lot going on there when you walk by. And so that's my only concern with that. Maybe there's a spot further back in the building because they really don't have any foot traffic that I see when I walk by. But that's my only comment on that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Why don't we go to, how about trustee Handler? Let's not make her the last. Kim?
Yeah, okay. Hi. Overall, great project. I mean, people have heard me say numerous times in meetings that there has been such a need for this. Empty nesters want to stay in the community, but aren't going to move to a 900 square foot apartment. They have too much stuff, and they do want to stay here. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about your recognizing that bespoke need. So all those are great. To cut right to the chase, the concerns I have, I have concerns with the height. I mean, it's very out of keeping with the rest of the whole corridor. That is sort of a tight, that whole corridor does feel very tight. And I think the 60 some feet will feel quite looming over Green Bay Road, which I don't think would be a positive. I'm also concerned about, and I need to understand the whole parking a little bit better. I think the assumption that someone that's going to move into a 3,500 to 5,000 square foot condo is probably going to have two cars, even if they're not going to be commuters who are commuting downtown and relying on one car in the train station. So I almost feel like that has to be built in. And you propose tandem parking. Not quite sure how attractive that would be. People might be willing to live with that. But again, a combination of the residents, a potential restaurant, which Trustee Dahlman just mentioned, and other shoppers, I would need to understand that and make sure there's really solid parking plan in place. And last, also interested in the whole use of the Tower Court area. Today, I agree that it's sort of an afterthought and unsightly area of town compared to so many other lovely areas that we have. However, I just know as a resident pulling into the Walgreens parking lot and having to turn left, it's often very tight and crowded, and having to go all the way up to Minos and around is sort of cumbersome. I don't know if we've had a problem with people not following the one-way, given that since Walgreens has been there. But again, I'd want to make sure that whole part of the plan was really thought through in terms of traffic flow, volume, and what that whole Tower Court pass-through would look like.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Would you use trustee Orsic?
Several of my questions have already been addressed or brought up. The parking, I also find concerning. We'd have to understand how many people are living there, and also 7 spots that are both for guests and the public using the commercial spaces seems light to me. These open space floors, do you have minimum or maximum square footage that people can purchase?
What would you say? 25. Probably nothing less than 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
Because the problem is if the units get so small, the balance of the floor plate gets thrown off, right? So if a concession is made for someone wanting a small unit, it's putting more stress on the balance of the floor. The intention for this is to be much larger, floor plans, much larger floor plates for the units themselves. Plus, it's also driving the notion of, we know we can park 2+ cars per unit downstairs without any issue. And the tandem parking that Trustee Handler was speaking of is a very real thing for people who have more than 2 cars. And maybe they put one or two of them on a trailer and they leave one here as they go to Florida for the winter or however that might be. So we want to more than accommodate the parking for the residents, but we're also sensitive to the fact that the ground floor commercial, which today doesn't have any parking allotted for it, or the residents who park along Tower Court or on the street or in the parking deck, there's not a lot of accommodation today. So we recognize the fact that, as is the case with most every development that we get involved in anywhere, parking is an issue, and we need to be sensitive to it.
And then when we're looking at this picture, the massing does look almost twice as tall as the buildings next to it. So I think that that's going to have to be, unless we're going to end up reimagining the whole street bigger, which I guess is an option if there were enough, if we thought that we could increase parking and all that. But unless we're imagining the whole street getting bigger, it does look a little bit awkward and out of context with its neighbor. But otherwise, I do think it's a great idea. I think there's a great amount of need for this kind of living, and I do believe you would have a list of people signing up for it. So it's interesting.
We appreciate the comments.
Kirk?
I have some questions for Ann, and if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. It's regarding parking. I don't know if you want to. So the way our parking ordinance stands right now, do we have parking requirements for existing retail spaces in place?
The existing spaces are not required to provide parking.
Okay, so if someone was to tear down a building and build retail in its place, then that's what triggers the parking
Correct.
requirements?
Right.
Okay.
1 per 2,000.
One per
it is.
2,000 for retail. Got it.
Whatever that gross floor area.
Yeah, no, I'm putting you on the spot. It's not necessarily a quiz, just
But it's
curious.
for new development,
So,
yes.
but if we're replacing in kind, we're triggering additional on-site parking
Correct.
requirements.
Right. The new development is required to provide it.
Does our ordinance cover any aspect of, in these types of situations where essentially you have, or maybe not in this one because there is an existing, I don't know if you would call it an alley, but a courtyard. Do we cover anything in the ordinance about if there is no on-site available space for parking?
No.
So essentially, we're triggering the requirement for someone would have to create on-site space for on-site parking.
Correct.
Okay. And then regarding the building height, can you walk us through again? I know you have it in writing, but just simplistically, if you've got it in your head, what the requirement is for height and setback as you step up or back as you go up.
So the maximum overall is 45 feet.
And is that to the top of the penthouse, to the top of a doghouse?
To the top of the
parapet?
building. So in this
Top of the
instance,
building.
it's to the top of the penthouse, so 62 feet is what the height is considered to be proposed. In terms of the setback, the 4th story is to be set back at least 10 feet from the front.
Is
Okay,
it-
that's like the wedding cake effect or the step back.
Got it. And now here's the real quiz. Is it pertain specifically to the 4th floor or the top floor?
The 4th and higher, because the ordinance is written that you're allowed a maximum of 4 stories. So it's assumed that 4th floor is set back. If you're going higher than 4, you're asking for relief.
But if you
For
go up
height.
3, you don't have to set back.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. All right, I've got a couple questions for John. So in terms of the parking you laid out, in terms of the numbers that you've presented in this concept,
Yes.
the tandem parking is counted.
It's not.
It's not counted.
It's not counted.
Okay.
There's 29 parking spaces, conventional parking spaces in the basement.
And if you were to-
There's the opportunity for up to 26 more, I believe, if tandem, we've created a great deal of depth in the basement that a resident could say, I'd like a cage down there and have it be storage for other things that I have. Or I'd say, I'd like more parking because I have a 3rd vehicle. Or I just want to leave it open for right now. So there's flexibility in that lower level, but we are accommodating 2 cars per unit fundamentally in a conventional delivery.
So based on the current parking requirements, if you were to include the tandem spots,
Yes,
where would you be relative to the required number of stalls?
significantly over by 25 cars.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
What's that number, John? Because I think 61 was the required, Ann, parking spaces?
That includes the commercial space as well, I believe, right?
So how many would be below ground? Go on up to the podium, man. I don't, John, I'm just questioning significantly over. I don't know if significantly is correct, but.
So here, now that I have the stuff in front of me, there is the potential of 56 parking spaces below grade for residents.
And
There are
there-
29 that are being shown conventionally, and the balance of which are kind of shaded in where optional storage is shown on the drawing as being potential tandem spots.
So 59 and the required based on number of residents would be what?
If there's 14 units in the building, we at a maximum, we'd be required to have 28 spots, 2 per unit. If it's a
Okay, where's the
3-bedroom,
61 coming from?
that includes the demand of the commercial parking on the ground floor.
Okay.
So if you add it all together,
We got the residential covered without any issue, and the lower level is private. So that is not a concern for anyone. I think the conversation that needs to be had is how do we deal with ground floor commercial space from a parking perspective? And how do we solve for it depending upon who those tenants are?
can I ask, what is the current commercial/retail square footage amongst all these parcels right now?
Oh, the current,
Current,
that's a good
existing.
question, Kirk. Close to 20,000 square feet.
And what's being proposed? 15.4.
15.4 of demisable retail.
But one's an auto
Oh, but some of that
repair.
includes the Europa Motors,
Yeah,
right? Which is a
which
huge
is not
space.
really like a heavily trafficked, it's not
There's
compared.
probably 25 to 30 cars on any given day back there that are for that, inside and outside that building.
Right, but they're parked and they can double park them. It's not
Correct.
like a restaurant.
No, you're correct.
Or like, Town and Oak sort of thing.
Okay. Kirk, anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, I'll just make just a couple comments, Jen, questions. I think it's a really nice project. I think you're hearing some of the concerns.
Yes.
Some of it is not enough height, some of it is too much height, not enough parking, so on and so forth. The one thing that struck me, and I almost get a kick out of it, is the compensating benefits, the public benefit that's being listed. Basically, the public benefit is, gee, we're bringing this great building to you, and everyone's going to love it, and that's a public benefit.
Kind of, yeah.
It's,
I wrote that.
That was very creative. We might want some additional public benefit. And one thing I was thinking about, because we have our next item on our agenda relates to solar, and our Chase Bank over here puts solar on the roof.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Would you consider solar as an energy source for this building?
Certainly.
Or a green roof.
Certainly.
I mean, I
Green
think-
roof for sure.
I think, well,
Yeah, I mean, however this roof gets developed, that would all be taken into consideration.
think
But
about
yes.
sustainability with this building.
We definitely would think about this. I mean, anything that we're approaching today has to be, the notion of sustainability is a kind of a foundational part of a conversation.
Good. Now, this building is your other sister building over here. It's apples and oranges, there's no
Correct.
doubt. But the height over there is, I think, 62 feet.
It is,
Just for the
yes.
record.
Yeah.
And it's a different building, but that is 62
This
over
is,
there.
if you look at this building mass as floors 1 through 4, it's a shorter building because of the construction typology that's anticipated, because of it being a concrete building. We can tighten that all up. That's a wood building, so as a result, that floor to floor, the joist, the structure of that floor forces the building to be taller.
Okay,
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Tower Court, the alley, the road, that obviously has to be thought of. Someone mentioned Gage Street, Rob did. We just have to think about that.
Yep.
So that would be part of it. But, you know, hopefully you're getting, look, why don't we, at the moment here, open this up for any public comment on this agenda item? Come on up, Katie, if you have public comment on this.
I just have a couple of questions that
Katie, 3 minutes, please.
I'm not even going to be 3.
Okay.
Is the rooftop a 5th floor or 4th floor? And I know they don't have to answer. And I'm very concerned about the parking and a restaurant. And I wondered if the height could be kind of reconsidered.
Okay. Other, very good, appreciate that. Other public comment on this item?
I'll make a comment, only I wasn't planning on it.
Sure.
My comment is, everyone's talking about parking. Why not go down? Why not a sub-basement with parking? Residents could park on the
think there
lower
is a-
level. Residents could park on the lower level, and the main parking or the higher parking underground could be for commercial.
Okay. Other public comment, come on up. It's not required, but feel free to introduce yourself.
Joanna Karatzis. I used to live at 901 Green Bay, like a long time ago when our house was being remodeled. But one question I have is, one resident is going to get the entire roof garden, and everybody else, I mean, I can't quite see on the floors 2 and 3, do they have any balconies or outdoor spaces or anything?
I think, John, I'll answer the first part of that. I think the roof garden, the penthouse area, is available to all the 4th floor units, I believe.
I thought there was only one 4th floor unit.
There's not one floor, there's multiple units.
Yeah, multiple units.
Oh, okay, I
Right, but
misunderstood you.
but that access would only be granted to people who live on the 4th floor. If you and I lived on floor 2, we can't go up on the roof.
Okay, well, so does floor 2 and 3, do they have?
Every unit has outdoor space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just-
Very important part of the program.
Thank you, good questions. Other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We'll bring it up here. Do people have some thoughts on direction for this project?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Kirk and I followed direction and only asked questions as opposed to providing
Well,
comments
that's-
right at the beginning.
that was
So, Kurt,
duly
you know,
noted.
shout out to
Duly
you.
noted.
So comment-wise, you know, I think we're all saying pretty much the same thing. You're hearing it about parking, the concern there. I mean, I think my concern would be residents saying, well, I've only got one car, I want storage space instead, and then they have 2 cars and it's found parking on the street. So I think we might have to think in terms of parking tags for residents in that might call them out so we can see something like that. But I think in general, I think you're hearing we're all kind of concerned about parking. In terms of this 5th floor, which I view it, you know, Katie's question was at the 4th or 5th floor. I view it as the 5th floor, which is this, call it the garden floor, I guess. I would definitely want to make sure that that is set back enough so that we're not looming over the street and having a lot of shading in that street. And I think if it's a garden that provides the flexibility to do that. I also, if there's a desire to set back the 4th floor less than 10 feet, I'd really want to understand that rationale and what the impact is on that, you know, on the street below. I mean, I think to the point that was raised, you know, this is much bigger than the buildings around it, but the buildings on either side of it are less than 45 feet, which is allowed by zoning. So, you know, I don't think that we are I don't view this as going significantly over. I like the idea that it's a garden on the top floor. You know, I understand Trustee Dahlman's point about going higher enables you to also go lower because of the economics. I get that. But I think I would have difficulty adding another story on top of this unless it was set back quite significantly. And but I like the direction. It's certainly in touch with the comprehensive plan. So.
Thank you. Okay. Rob, any final thoughts?
No new comments.
No comments? Tina, any final thoughts?
Yeah, that was my intent when I said going higher meant being able to afford going lower since it's so expensive. One question though, and I forgot to mention, our comment is for the parking underground, is it, you know, one thing to think about, can you go lot line to lot line, not just under the building permit? Yeah, so you can take advantage of the proposed drive aisle. But otherwise, yeah, I'm excited about seeing a project that brings the type of housing that we know we need, and excited. Thanks for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Okay. Bridget?
I already made my comments to Scott's point.
Sure.
I do have comments. First, I appreciate the desire and the intent to add more housing and varied housing to the community. I think it's a great and welcome concept. I really like the concept of connecting the alley via some sort of, you know, whatever you want to call it, a drive aisle, and to enhance that so it's not just an alley between the street and the other alley. I would say I would encourage the design team to work with the village to explore, and this leads into previous discussions we've had about the use of the alley, and there's a name for it. What is the name?
Tower Court.
Tower Court. Not just as a place, as an alley for service vehicles and, you know, to tightly fit parallel stalls, but what is the proposed access for bicycles within the community? How can we open up that alley for more intentional use instead of it being treated as an alley or as an afterthought? And I think there's an opportunity here with a full depth building with a proposed connection between the two to really think through that use. So it's intentional and not just like, okay, we're going to do this great through lot access point with, you know, storefronts or landscaping, and then in effect almost dead end into something that hasn't been truly thought out, whether it be just design, circulation, access through, safety, all that. John, can you go back to slide 26, the previous slide? I do have significant concerns, and I'm trying to be as direct and without exaggerating, significant concerns about the massing of the building. Well, there's three things I want to talk about: parking, massing, and design. I personally am not in favor of allowing any sort of variance or exception to the height. I personally have concerns about the 45 feet that we have today. There's a reason Hubbard Woods, albeit it is a little bit of an urban area with a highway running through it to some effect, but I get concerned about making it even feel more like a large city urban environment. When I look at this building, I know you could design something beautiful, but when I think about the massing of this, it feels like we're now heading into more of a Wilmette or Lincoln Park type typology, whereas what we have today is more of a Glencoe Lake Forest typology. And I think what we're going to do is, if we grant any sort of variance beyond what the maximum required is today, we're essentially resetting the playing field to encourage other economically focused investors to look at all these other properties. And we can only expect within a generation or two that if the community is a desirable place to operate or to develop, that we should expect all these other buildings shown on this image could go away and get replaced. So I would say I'm only one voice, and I know there's all the disclosures in the memo tonight, but I'm going to be steadfast holding to our height limitations on this corridor. I think it's really important, and specifically different from when you went through the process with One Winnetka. I felt like that was a little bit isolated. We had some context there with the existing condos to the south, and also because there wasn't a lot of immediately adjacent buildings where there was an opportunity where you could work creatively around the height variance request that you had. I don't feel like, personally, that we should be considering that at this location. Regarding the massing, I would say I'm less concerned as you step back into the property where it's not visible. And I would encourage you as well to, and it's not a criticism, but there's a lot of sleight of hand when you're doing the various perspectives of different vantage points down the block to make it feel less significant. I would encourage you to find the worst vantage points to accentuate or to prove that a building of this massing and this size and height would feel appropriate. And I'm one opinion, but I feel as though that extra floor is out of place, especially along the street front. As it relates to the design, I know it's early in the concept phase of the project. I would encourage you to not be too tempted with the current fads that are out there. Although the other represented projects you included in your portfolio and the packet are all beautiful, well-received, but there's a significant amount of trendiness in some of the elements.
Yes.
And these aren't negatives, but I just worry a bit about being too trendy with where things are at today, and without stating all the obvious items. I would recommend that the entire design development team really think not just what we have in place, what's been here since, let's say, when things were started to be developed close to 100 years ago, but what's going to be timeless in the next 100 years.
Completely agree with you, Kirk.
The last point, I'll just touch on the parking. Parking is a significant issue throughout all of our 3 downtown areas. In one respect, especially in a mid-block site like this, that there should be some consideration provided for parking for commercial buildings. I think we're going to be damaging our own intent with creating a beautiful street front and a block if we mandate that commercial lots require that they have on-site commercial parking. I think that's a little dangerous because although they've done it creatively here with providing a cut-through area where they can provide on-site parking, and maybe there's even ways to improve the number of stalls, like angled stalls, and that. I worry about creating an effect where now we've got the Walgreens building with parking, so you've got I guess what we would call an empty tooth, and then now we're going to create another aspect of that right here, and as more redevelopment may occur on the street, we might be negatively impacting that street frontage that a lot of planners would want to accentuate in terms of the buildings meeting the street without a lot of gaps in between.
There is a gap today.
There is a gap today, but it's not significant and it's not necessarily noticeable, right? You're talking about the gap today being that alley.
You can drive into the building now.
And it's not, I mean, to be honest, it's not really recognizable, and in fact, it's got a neat little play to it, right? What I'm seeing here being proposed is probably 3-4 times that width. So
no, I don't know if it's that wide. It's probably twice as wide, but we do have to, if we have it, we need to accommodate emergency vehicles and the like. So there's an engineering aspect as well as a kind of a design aspect to this.
So I would just say,
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily criticism on the project regarding the parking. I would say we shouldn't mince words. I know we all understand we have a parking issue, but if we swing the pendulum and just enforce parking verbatim, whatever the ordinance says, we're going to be doing that at the detriment to creating a beautiful street front and in creating a continuous or a cohesive, whatever, and I'm losing all my terminology tonight, but that experience, that pedestrian experience up and down the block. And I remember when Walgreens came through with their, or at that time, whatever the market was, but there was a lot of debate at the Design Review Board about trying to not have that missing tooth effect And there was part of the logic behind that brick, and that archway was trying to minimize that. So I would just encourage a lot of dialogue with staff. I personally have concerns about the way things are written right now, right? We're sort of dueling against ourselves, and depending on what it is you're focused on. But I want to acknowledge that we have a significant parking issue. And I would, without having an answer for it, I would say let's just not take it for granted that either we should force on-site parking or necessarily eliminate parking that's required. I don't know what the answer is. So I'll just repeat, just to hit it home, it's parking, massing, and design are my three concerns.
Good, okay.
But thank you. I appreciate the first pass and look forward to seeing more of this in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirk. Kim?
Yeah, actually, I will just, because I was trying to stick to questions, but I did launch into comments a little bit. I actually do echo a lot of what Trustee Elbinson just said, because one of my additional comments was I was a little uneasy with some of the characterization of potential design being so open-ended at this point, and less commentary about making sure it really fit into the existing community. Again, I'm not saying everything should be Tudor by any means, but the Hubbard Woods does have like a nice intimate vibe to it, and I would want to make sure that something felt traditional and was very welcoming in that regard. And I just did want to drive home the point that I do have serious concerns about the height. I have a very hard time wrapping my mind around 62 feet in the Hubbard Woods area. One Winnetka is a whole different area in my mind, across from a train station in one regard. This time the train station is behind the building, and the mass of the building is right there on the corridors I mentioned. So I would love to see you all work hard, look at the design very seriously, and try to reduce the height overall. But that's it.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Just to wrap it up, John, thank you.
Thank you.
Todd and Peter, thank you very much. We appreciate you even considering a significant investment in this town, so thank you for that. I think you've got some feedback. I think the appetite was pretty positive generally, but there are some things to think about. It goes through our lower plan development commission and design review board, and then ultimately it comes back to us, and we hope you consider going through that process. So thank you, John.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back.
Okay, very
All right,
good.
Have a nice night.
All right, let's move on to item 10, which is old business. We have none. New business. We do have some new business, and I'm sorry for the late night for some of the folks here, but we're going to go to item 11A. Our Environmental, Forestry, and Sustainability Commission is bringing to us solar panels regulations presentation. Council will review and consider the proposed ordinance changes to the village code related to solar panel installation. And we have Elise Steiner, our sustainability coordinator, is here, and several members of the EFSC are here. Well, two members of the EFSC, and Kim Handler was part of a subgroup, and I think that Elise, you'll talk about this, maybe Peter Eck will talk about this. Okay, and you can talk about what the subgroup did, Peter, and what the mission was, and how we got to where we are today.
Great, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Good evening. My name is Peter Eck, and I am the chair of the Environment, Forestry, and Sustainability Commission. As you're probably well aware, we added sustainability to the official name earlier this year, and it is a major focus of what we do. I've been on the commission for about 3 years now, and I've been chair of the commission since earlier this year. I'd like to introduce a couple of my team members and colleagues who are here with us this evening. Bob already mentioned Elise Steiner. We are so fortunate in Winnetka to have a dedicated sustainability coordinator, especially one as talented as Elise. I do not take that for granted, that we have somebody who's focused on sustainability topics day in, day out, and hopefully you'll see some of the benefits of that in the work tonight. We also have King Poor, a commissioner on EFSC, who has done residential solar in his very own home. So we'll take a look at some of those pictures this evening, and he'll speak to that experience. Very grateful for Kim Handler, who is the Village Council liaison to the EFSC. She's been extremely involved and helpful throughout, and just a great resource to us, so appreciative of that model as well. We have Scott Mangum here, who is very instrumental throughout this process in helping us understand how residential solar has worked in Winnetka to date and how it might work in the future. We also work closely with Nick Narhi. John Ripka provided input, and so it's been a great cross-functional effort to educate us and help us get to this point. So this evening, what I'd like to speak with everybody about is the following. We've got an overview of how residential solar works in Winnetka today, the current state of things. I'll share some numbers, I'll share pictures, I'll share the process side of things. I'll take you through objectives for improvement. We'll talk about the approach that we took in gathering feedback and input, the review process and other things that we looked at, and ultimately the recommendations that we would like to bring to you this evening. Overall, what our charge was to benchmark solar in neighboring communities and make recommendations to modernize Winnetka's solar panel zoning ordinance. Broadly speaking, and to put it into layman's terms, I think of it as how do we look at how Winnetka can better embrace residential solar? What would that mean? How can we take a step forward here? We care about sustainability as a village. This is one aspect of that. And so we've looked at how can we overhaul how residential solar works in Winnetka and make it work better for the future. Okay, so here I'm not going to read through all of this, but I'll try to share the highlights. So residential solar wasn't really a thing in Winnetka before 2010. The first install happened in 2012, and it sort of slowly increased from there. We'll look at some data in a couple of slides that shows that there was a major uptick in interest after 2020. That's when residential solar in Winnetka and really across the North Shore started to expand more rapidly. Last year, Winnetka took a step forward and increased the capacity for residential solar installations. As the technology continues to improve, you can generate more power from a household with the same footprint, and installers are also getting better at thoughtfully fitting panels onto homes and doing that while maintaining safety requirements and making it work for both the village and for homeowners. Winnetka currently has a credit system, so when a resident installs residential solar, they get credits back for the surplus energy that they give to the grid. So all of that works just fine in Winnetka today. A house that has solar panels on the roof, it's pretty much all rooftop installations here. If that is generating surplus energy beyond what the home can use, it does actually go back onto the grid. They will get a credit for that surplus energy, so they'll save by not purchasing energy from the grid. But if there's surplus, they will get a credit for that. And the credit's a bit better in the summer when our energy is, our electricity is more expensive. So overall, it's an attractive credit system here. That part is working pretty well. We're not going to get into proposed changes to the credit system this evening. Winnetka does quite well here, and actually significantly better than local communities that go off the ComEd rates. So we have a competitive rate system, and it's not dilutive to other residents, which is one great thing and an important thing for us to understand. This is residents who do not have residential solar are not subsidizing their fellow residents that want to do this. So the credits help those that do embrace it, but it is not at the cost of other taxpayers. It, of course, reduces our demand during expensive peak load periods. This could become quite an important factor in the years to come as residential solar will hopefully expand in Winnetka. So if we're generating more, which especially happens during the summer months and especially in the afternoons when the energy demand is greatest for the village, that offsets how much the electricity the village then needs in order to power the homes and businesses that are here. Scott can speak to this best, as can Nick, but when the village has to go source energy and purchase the energy that we use, if they have to go purchase additional peak energy, that's actually more expensive. So if we can help offset that, that'll be quite attractive. We have not fully dug into that, the financials around that, but that is something of interest for the years ahead. What we do know is solar works well here, it's beneficial, and we want to support it. And by and large, people have had a good experience with solar. So King will speak to this in just a minute, but it's worked okay. We see a lot of ways that we can work better, but it has certainly been a positive thing for the community thus far. Okay, so while all of that sounds good and well, and it is, Winnetka also lags neighboring communities with residential solar. So we only have about 14 installations on homes today. There are a few more in the works, and there are some 2 commercial solar installs. We heard about the one that's going in on the roof of Chase. I don't think that's counted in those numbers, but we have it on one of the schools. We also have it at the Public Works on Willow. And those have been very positive proofs of concept. But when you look around at neighboring communities, they have far more of an installed base. When Northbrook has over 200 installs, Wilmette's well over 100, Highland Park over 60, and so forth. So we are behind. And if you ask any residential solar installer in the area, they will, one of the first things they say is like, oh yeah, Winnetka is way behind everybody else on this. We just don't have as much. And they would love to do more and see that change, not just from the business standpoint, because they see opportunity. Our neighbors, part of what they've done to drive up their usage of residential solar has been to change how their codes work and to specifically address residential solar in the codes. And that's the crux of what we're recommending tonight. Neighboring communities largely permit residential solar by right. So they say, yes, we want people to do this. It is allowed. There are restrictions and requirements, but it is absolutely something that people can do. In Winnetka, we have tried to treat it that same way, but it has technically been a special use permit. So the village has done its very best to work with residents and to shepherd these projects through the process, but almost despite the code not making it easy or clear on how we actually should do that. So that is what we would like to see changed. Specifically, that means making it a permitted accessory use and giving it its own dedicated ordinance, basically language to make sure this is responsibly done. So I'll kind of turn it over to King here to talk about his experience having done this, but basically residents submit an application, it goes to Scott's team to guide it through the review process, get input from the fire department, the utility, make sure that it's a well-designed installation that meets all of our requirements. And then installers from there, installers are already involved at that point. They're helping to surface information, they're sharing the project overview, and they can complete an install sometimes within 30 days. It can take months, especially if there's an onerous review process. But yeah, King, do you want to speak to your experience and how that played out for you?
Everyone, and I'm going to have my solar app here if there's any questions on that. And I guess the main thing I can add tonight is in 2020, my wife and I, Hope, decided we would install solar. We've been thinking about it for a long time, but the price really came down starting around 2020, and it became affordable, and I'm glad to even talk about that. I'll answer any questions that you have. That's probably, I'm here as your resource about somebody who's done this, lived with it for 5 years, and are very satisfied with what the experience has been. I've heard that, well, Winnetka's requirements are burdensome. Well, maybe on paper they are, but we found that community development was very helpful. We did not have any big lags. It worked reasonably well to get it up and working, and we have 19 panels. Ours is the house in the middle right there. Terry Cross of Go Green Winnetka took that picture for our solar tour a few years ago, and I was happy to be an ambassador for solar. We were only the 8th house in Winnetka to install these back in 2020, and here we are 5 years later. We're only at house number 14. So as Peter said, we have a way to catch up with communities like Wilmette. They're way over 100. I don't know the exact number, but it's 160 or something like that. So Winnetka at 14, Wilmette at, a peer community, maybe they're double in size, but still, I mean, there's a lot of room for us to increase the number of houses with solar in Winnetka. But the thing that, as Peter said, at least on paper, that there are some potential complexities that somebody looking at it for the first time might think, well, this is kind of daunting. So the purpose of what we're coming to you with tonight is to streamline this and to make Winnetka something of a model of ease and efficiency in installing solar panels. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when any of these companies that do this work on the North Shore are thinking about Winnetka. It's like, yes, this is a community that is easy to work with. It's efficient, and so homeowners know that they're not going to get tied up with this. I've heard another story of somebody who waited a long time, and you don't want that. You want the idea that when you if somebody comes to Winnetka, it can get done efficiently. They know what they're doing, and that's what's going to encourage more homeowners to think about solar. And so we've got a real opportunity here, and what we've done is put together this term sheet, which, as Peter's going to explain a little bit more, is the idea. Our ask tonight is that we can move forward with this and have Peter put this into an ordinance that we could even consider as soon as a meeting in November to move us forward with a new ordinance, and that's something that Peter will also be talking about in terms of how we communicate this to our residents and let them know that this is something new and this is something that really is worth considering. So we have 19 panels. We have generated about 39,000 kilowatts of electricity over the last 5 years. And that roughly translates into about 90% of our house's electrical needs. That includes an electric water heater. And so we've been very pleased with it. And ask me any questions you want. I mean, what happens when the snow covers them? Well, if you're interested, I'll tell you. But it really has been a very positive experience, and I think, financially, environmentally, my app says we've offset 40 tons of CO2 during that period. That's one house, and you can multiply that by, if we start moving this in the direction that we want to, hopefully in a year from now we'll have a significantly greater number of houses. We can build on that, and that's something, as Winnetka is a community that's always looked to be a community that is forward-thinking. We want to catch up with Wilmette and Highland Park and everyone else, and we can do it. And this ordinance is a really good first step to do that. But it will be just a first step, because we also want to, education is going to be so important here for people. Because I've talked to so many people about residential solar. You wind me up. You won't stop me. But so I know. My 3 minutes is going to be up very soon. It probably already is. But that's it in a nutshell about our experience. And really, if you have questions about how it works, and ask me now, or I'm glad to talk to anybody offline about it.
Thank you, King. Peter, do you want to continue on here?
Sure. Thanks, King. Promise the strategy was not to have King wear everybody down and then we get to the recommendations, but good job, King. But his home, King is so excited about solar. I was expecting, when he invited me to come see it, some like California-sized array in the backyard. And it's a historic home. It's beautifully done. It really is not obtrusive. I love data. This is a simple map showing the last 5 years and how much residential solar has changed around the country. So, look, everybody's headed in this direction. We all know that. The data shows it. Even in the Midwest, actually the Midwest probably shows some of the locations of greatest change, right? Of course, California was doing this 5 years ago. The Chicago suburbs were not to the same extent, but they are now, and we should be too. This is a bit more data. This shows the number of installs by year based on when the household installations went live, and we broke it down by community. I know that's hard to see, but some of the bigger buckets there, Northbrook, Glenview, and Wilmette, are the three largest, with Highland Park very close to Wilmette. But those three accounted for about 2/3 of the installs the past 3 years. 2020, big step up, and then it took a little step down, but the trend line's clear, right? It's gone up quite a bit. I think it will continue to grow from here. So I already mentioned what our call to action was, but and King mentioned a few of these. We really tried to keep it simple. So we're trying to add an ordinance that doesn't really exist today. What we do have today is literally code from decades ago where anything relevant to solar panels is looped in with basically like the big 10-foot antennas that people used to put on their roof with like dish TV. I mean, those are not the same things. So we need a dedicated ordinance that addresses this. We shouldn't make it too onerous for people. We should be responsible. But the way we think about it is it should be a step forward. There's no reason this has to be set in stone for the next even 5 years, right? But it's a step forward. Let's take a good step. We can always refine it as we go. But we want to keep this simple and have it work well for folks. So we got input from residents. We looked at what neighboring communities are doing. We had Certasun, who's one of the leading local installers, come and speak to us twice, actually, about how this works in Illinois and the tax credits and their experience as an installer. Elise has done a lot of great work with SolSmart, which is a solar accreditation program, and Winnetka can actually be SolSmart Silver if we embrace this opportunity to be permitted by right instead of a special exception. And then we worked really closely with cross-functional stakeholders in the village, and I mentioned a lot of these names earlier. So we specifically drafted the proposal. We got input from all of these stakeholders, great commentary, and so I think we've done a lot of good work to have people who are extremely knowledgeable in how this works in practice chime in and say, yes, this should work well. So where did we land? The ordinance that, Elise, has it been posted? I don't know if everybody's seen the exact, okay, but it will be, it can be soon. The ask is that this ordinance would actually go to Peter for refinement into turning this into a draft that would be in the proper zoning text amendment ordinance. And then we could have a public hearing and consider adoption of that draft at the November 18th Village Council meeting. Basically what the ordinance does is it says they're permitted accessory use, or kind of permitted by right. There still are requirements, and there's still going to be a review process. Panels should be building mounted. We are saying they can be ground mounted or freestanding. We want to start with the limitation to backyards. And I suspect there are questions on that. Why not a side yard or corner yard? I think maybe that works in the future. But again, I think we want to take a clear step forward that we're confident is a good step, and then let's see how this goes. Let's see what other applications people would like to do and make a more informed, data-driven decision down the road once we've learned a bit more. The panels that are, might be in a side yard right next to the street where kids are playing, they can be damaged by a football. There are a bunch of considerations there that we should look into, and per the comment earlier, we've given this a lot of thought. We don't have all the answers, but let's take that step and continue to learn from there. The ordinance does align with best practices on emergency access, making sure if there were a fire that first responders can get up there on the roof and move about and do what they need to do. We've given thought to setback limits, the tree considerations. We don't want somebody to just say, oh, I want to do a solar install, and there's a beautiful old tree blocking my roof, so that's got to go, right? There would still be a review process for that. And this last one's last two are quite important. So we're not trying to be too prescriptive to say this is exactly what a solar install has to look like. But we don't want it to have ill effect on other neighboring parcels, right? You don't want to suddenly have reflection into your home or your grass dying because of heat. That really doesn't happen with modern solar panels. There's very little reflectivity. They're matte designs, so we do not expect any issues here, but that is how, from a language standpoint, we've tried to keep it simple but still protect the interests of other residents. And then also really important that if somebody's system goes down, we don't want it to stay on the roof as an eyesore. We don't want it to become a liability. So if it is inoperable for 12 months, the resident is responsible for taking that down. And there is language in there that would enable the village to intervene if needed. So that's really the crux of it. I'm sure there'll be some questions on that, and so I'd love to get into it. But I would finally just like to thank Bob for tasking the EFSC to dig into specific improvements, share our ideas, like let's get real work done here. And I love that we have this forum and opportunity to push things forward, because it's not just a group of people that love trees and the environment. We want to really support the village and make tangible improvements and shape the future. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Peter. And this working group of the EFSC, I'm really impressed with this group. They've taken it, bull by the horns. Elise, thank you. King, terrific. Peter, great leadership. And Kim, liaison. So it's a really focused group. I'm really impressed. Before we do council questions, why don't we open this up for public comment? We'll kind of move along here. Would anyone like to make public comment on this agenda item? No? No public comment? Okay, we'll bring it up here. Questions, comments for anyone that's spoken here?
I can give just my general comments. This is excellent. And I think that the points you laid out on the last slide, you kind of hit everything that Peter needs to know if this Peter's the one that ends up writing it.
Not this Peter, I know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you thought of everything, and the points are useful, they're actionable, they're succinct. It's great, and I think that we've been treating it as something that is of right, and we should just make it permitted as of right. I think you've done a great job. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, other thoughts? Tina?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions because we've been having this experience with the bankruptcy of two major solar companies. I think we should put in the ordinance something to that effect, that if your provider, because these are still largely leased systems. No, you own yours, King? Okay, so we probably should talk about that because we offer it as an option on our homes, particularly in California, and we've had lots of nightmares for homeowners that have purchased homes from us who had lease systems with those companies going into bankruptcy, that we should probably just talk about how we handle that, and just also, I'm sure the EFCS will also provide information for people about that, right? Owning versus leasing the solar systems. But very excited to see this come, and I'm trying to think of how I can trim some trees and have a system on my house as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Rob?
No, I think you have a lot of heads nodding up here at the council, as you would expect, hopefully. I'm going to keep it short to try and keep this night going, but I think it's great. I think the only hangups might be around design and south-facing on front of houses versus rear, and neighbors having issues. We have to figure that out, which is on the roofs. Is there an issue, or how do we think through how they face? Because we don't want neighbor wars. I'm looking at my neighbor's solar. I've heard that in other communities that there's some issues, but I think it's great. Let's just think that through and get it going.
Okay, Scott?
I mean, I think this is a great first step. I view it as a first step, right? I do think that we need to be continuing to push, and I know that that's part of the charge is what's the next step, but I think this is the right first step. It's an easy first step. I think we get it going. I would like to hear King's hour-long presentation on his experience.
He's available Saturday morning.
I think maybe you and I can stay afterwards.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you. Kirk?
Great first steps. Love where it's going. Question, do we have anything in our current ordinance, or is there any discussion about proposed ordinances as it relates to energy storage, or is this really just covering residential solar only?
So it is not specifically focusing on the addition of battery installs as part of this. A battery install would only be part of a solar system, so I view that as a second step, a double click sort of, or ordinance expansion. So we are not trying to address that now. It wouldn't conflict with anything in the ordinance now, but it is not focused on that. That would be an additional opportunity area for us to dig into battery pack installations, EV charging at home, and do we need more language around that? That's another work stream. Some of the considerations with a battery pack would be, can it go inside? Can it only go inside a detached garage? Do you need to put up protective pillars so that the car doesn't pull forward and hit the battery pack on the wall? So there are a number of considerations there. And that is absolutely an opportunity area for us to dig into that, among other things related to this topic. So I think if the interest tonight is that, yes, we're headed in the right direction, from communication strategy to how does this work to directing residents to qualified installers, there's a lot more we could do on this topic, including that.
Right. Thank you.
Trustee Handler, any thoughts as the liaison here? Are you in favor of this?
I am in favor of it. And I do want to thank Peter, Elise, King, Scott, and everybody else who really helped out on this, because we were able to fast track getting this done, which is sort of an exciting step when many people thought this might go on for quite some time. So I appreciate all your support for what the commission has done here tonight.
Great, great. And I'll maybe just close it up here. And I think you're getting a very warm reception here. Direction, I believe, to our village attorney will be to prepare an ordinance to this effect. Devil's in the details. I mean, I've talked to everyone on this working group. You've got a 100-year-old oak tree. Do we really want to tear that oak tree down to provide the southern exposure? These are the kind of things. I know, King, I took a tour of your home, and you had the southern exposure available, which was very fortunate. But tree issues, the ground mounted, make sure on this that we're not doing anything, to Rob's point, that we're creating conflict with neighbors and things like that. So I think devil's in details, but this is great. Elise, really well done on this. And I would say that I think there is a real reception here for the work the EFSC is doing. And I think a next step down the road to try to get ahead of ourselves, maybe, Scott, to your point a little bit, is, maybe you want to prepare some kind of guideline document, Peter, that might lay out some of the future initiatives that you're thinking about. Who would do it? Would the working group do it? Would the broad EFSC do it? And bring that to council for us to consider and then provide feedback and guidance from there. So I think this is terrific. So I think we have a direction. We do? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to item, hang on one second here. I think it's 11B. It's entitled Adoption of Lakefront Policy Guidelines, but that's okay, I understand. I think if we were to redo this agenda, which we're not redoing the agenda, we would probably call it Proposed Lakefront Policy Guidelines Discussion. We're not going to vote on this tonight. That's not going to happen. I think the council is going to defer this for the next meeting. But there's been a lot of talk about lakefront activities and so on over the past several years, and we hear it, we're participating in it. We felt it was important to develop some guidelines, and largely important for the public to understand, but also for our public safety personnel. Our police department is an issue for our police department, and so we felt that there should be some guidelines, and we took a crack at it. It's a draft. Our village attorney is going to go through this. So tonight, Peter Friedman will review these proposed lakefront policy guidelines. We'll review lakefront policy, elaborating on village policy in response to a number of questions that have been raised. I fully expect there will be suggested language change to this guideline, this policy, and we'll talk about that in the next couple weeks. I think there will be another draft put out. The public will see it. It'll come out in advance. The trustees will all see it, and we'll bring it back most likely on November 4th for consideration for adoption. That's kind of where we are on this right now. So I'll turn it over to our village attorney, Peter Friedman, to go from there.
Thank you, Mr. President. So it's a relatively short document. It's just over 2 pages, and I'm going to summarize some of the key points. I'm not going to read, the whole thing because I think everybody's had a chance now to review it. As you said, it was an attempt to put into easily understandable language some of the issues that have been discussed regarding the lakefront. On the one hand, our office is confident about the substantive issues that are set forth here, but we have we're of course open to the direction of the council as to how best to express those issues. So going through the issues, the key issue, or where you start, is what is public, what is private land along the lake. The general rule, well settled for property purposes, is it's the normal water line. That's not the same in all states, but it is that is what Illinois law is. All things being equal, generally the line where the water usually sits just naturally, that's the dividing line between public and private property. And there's, we've said this before, there's this kind of cute way of saying it. If your feet are wet, you're on public property. If they're dry, you may not be. But that's the general rule. But as the next point said, is what happens when that water line moves. On the one hand, if it moves naturally, which it does, because of the ebb and flow of the water line, so too does the property line. It is the, property owners who own on the lake know that if the water line, if the water gets higher, they lose some of their beach and it becomes public. The reverse is also true, that if it recedes naturally, then their dry land would increase. And the courts have said that is inherent in owning property in Illinois on the lake. But sometimes the water line does not change naturally. Sometimes it changes artificially. So what happens when it changes artificially? If there's 2 options. It could change artificially because of an unrelated third party does something somewhere that impacts property owners down the stream or in other parts of the lake, and our courts have said it remains where the water line is, even though that's artificially created. But for a property owner who wasn't the cause of that artificial change, it remains wherever the water line is. However, if there's a property owner or property owners who do something themselves to artificially change the water line, they do not get the benefit of new dry land that's accreted. That usually takes place, or it generally takes place, if there's construction of groins, of piers, of other types of shore activities that, again, artificially create more dry land. The courts are very clear, as is IDNR, that those property owners that cause that do not gain new dry land. That land, newly accreted land, remains public. The document also notes that the public trust line and the property line in Illinois are the same. That is also not the same in all states. It is in Wisconsin. It's not in Michigan. The General Assembly could change that. The court could change that, but that's our best assessment of where things are right now. What activities are allowed in public trust land? Again, the most traditional, obviously, it's a lake, so it's navigation, fishing, and commerce, but it's more than that. It also includes, and the language that we used is taken out of cases, navigation, fishing, and commerce, but also bathing, swimming, boating, and other shore activities. And shore activities obviously means walking along the public trust land and sitting. So those are all included in public trust activities. What's not included in public trust activities, I think this is logical, is things that are solely for private commerce, you know, that could interfere with other uses along the lake. But generally, those things are pretty well settled as what can be done on public trust property. We just noted that lakefront landowners also, because they're riparian landowners, they also have a right to access the lake along the width of their property. And to the extent there are conflicts, those just have to be dealt with. The public trust has to be, public trust activities can't unreasonably interfere with landowners, and landowners can't unreasonably interfere with public trust activities. The next issue is, I think, has gotten a lot of comments and concerns regarding when a private property owner builds something into the lake, like a stone groin, for example. And I think, as I reread this, I think the title was written correctly, but I think there's a word that has caused some confusion, so let me try to clarify that. It's easily fixable. The question that in the document says, are privately built stone groins private or public structures? However, in the body of it, rather than private structures, we said private property, and I think that has caused some confusion. So let me try to clarify. There's no question that the bed of the lake remains public. The bed of the lake is always public. The question is when the state allows a private property owner to construct a structure on the bed of the lake and into the lake, which the state does, who owns that structure? And the IDNR and the state have stated their belief, and we concur in it, that the structure is privately owned. That doesn't mean that the bed has gone private. The bed remains public. But the state, as we know, not just on the lake, but in all sorts of different places, because the public trust doctrine applies not just at the lake, but to a lot of state property. The state has the ability to issue permits for private property owners to build on state land. But that structure itself remains private. Now, so given that, what's the public's right to access some structure like that, like a stone groin, into the lake? And we just noted that that it may be that because it's a privately owned structure, that the use of that by someone other than the private property owner may constitute a trespass. That being said, there's obviously the circumstance of if it's going into the lake and in order to continue to use the public trust land that it's dissecting, then there may be a need in order to continue to, along the lakefront, to traverse that structure. That's why IDNR required or requires in these structures oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, that some staircase or some passageway or a gap be put in the structures to allow the public to continue along the public trust land. There may be a situation where that passageway or staircase through that structure may not be practical because the water may have risen, and so you can't walk except into maybe 2 or 3 feet of water. So there may be situations where it's necessary to traverse other parts of, for example, a stone groin, and that may not be a trespass. What was put in here is that even though that may not be a trespass, there is a concern with public safety. Those stone groins are obviously a dangerous thing to climb. And so I think the village is trying to be sensitive to both the right of the public to walk along public trust, but also not necessarily encouraging an activity that may be inherently dangerous. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the person who's choosing to do it, but I think the village was trying to balance those two interests. And I'll stop there. I think I've covered most of the points. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Why don't we just bring it back here for any questions before we go to public comment? Any initial questions for Peter? Scott?
I want to talk about this, the public structure element, the stone groins. Our objective as a village is to keep people safe, right? So what we want to avoid is people viewing the stone groin, steel groin, whatever, as a a play area, something that they can use to walk out further in the lake and dive off of or something like that, right? So I guess, do we need to get into referring to this as either public structure, private structure, public property, private structure on public property? Do we need to get into that, or can simply through an ordinance, can we say that stone groins are simply meant for traversing along the lake, wherever it is, and any additional activity is unsafe and from just, forget about trespassing, just from a safety point of view, is not allowed?
As a policy matter, we can definitely say that. I'm not sure it's an ordinance, because it's ultimately not, no matter what it is, it's not village property, right? So I just want to think about how we would, what we would say in an ordinance that we couldn't say in a document that sets forth the policy of, we think what you just said, if that's the council's direction.
Whether it's an ordinance, I guess what I'm getting at is, somebody calls the police and says, geez, there's a bunch of teenagers horsing around on a stone groin. The police show up. I would just want to make sure that they have the authority to say, guys, gals, whatever, you got to get off. You got to come back, right? So I don't know whether it's an ordinance, whether it's a policy, but rather than going down the path of trying to define, is this a private structure, public land, whatever, we simply want to enable people to traverse along the lake, and anything beyond that is putting people in danger and therefore putting our public safety people in danger also.
Good point. Okay. Rob?
Just want you've heard from me, I do like the thought that we're going to try and make this easier for our public servants to not get in the middle of a lot of issues. So I think it's good to clarify. As you know, I had issues with some of the way this is written, so I think it's great that we're redefining and tightening this. I'll wait until, I think there's some really good letters that came in, so I'd love to hear from the public.
Okay. Tina, anything?
I think I agree with the thought that it's probably not an ordinance, but I really appreciate the kind of succinct and kind of to the point nature of a policy document that gives guidance to the public as well as to our first responders, right? So we can point to this when there's an inevitable conflict of, people who think it's a public structure, but it's not. I think the law is really clear, and I think the basis of it is in our interest, right? We want property owners who install these per permits issued by governmental entities to take care and ownership of these structures that they install. We can have a long debate about whether these structures are correct or not, but they have been permitted, and the state treats, and the Army Corps treats them as private structures. And so I think it's in our best interest to continue to support that policy with the expectation that those property owners also need to maintain those structures, right, in accordance with the permits. So I think this is a good policy document to clarify that for the public as well as for property owners. So I appreciate this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Bridget?
I also am glad that we're working on some of the details. I think it's a great policy document. I do think some people brought it up, and I had noticed myself, I don't think we should be referring to any specific houses in here or any specific properties by address. I think that it should be for all of the property owners.
Okay, Kirk?
I don't have any questions at this point, but I may have more once we hear from the public.
Okay. Kim, thoughts?
No questions. I had given a lot of feedback on some of the details. Overall, I'm excited that we will have a policy document to clarify things for our first responders. But I also want to make sure that the document that we end up with includes both what people can do and what they can't do, that it's not just a what you can't do document, because I think that might still leave some confusion out there. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the public has to say, and then, of course, seeing a revised document for us to review.
Great. Okay, well, we've come to that moment. I'll ask if anyone in the audience would like to make public comment on this agenda item. Please keep in mind our 3-minute limitation. It's getting late here. And direct your comments to the council here. So raise your hand if you'd like to make public comment. How about back there on the left side, our left side?
Hi. So I'll be blunt. First of all, it's interesting to me, and I'm going to skip around, but it's interesting to me in the document, you know, you talk about expanded uses, swimming and all that. That all comes from people, X. Earl Scott v. Chicago Park District, 1970. And in that same very document, they talk about the fact that the court sees it's clear that those rights expand up to the ordinary high water mark. So the line for property ownership may be different, and is in fact different, based on precedent in Illinois. And there's a bunch of case law that talks about this, that the state cannot give away or subjugate land to private ownership for private benefit. This whole idea that these structures are somehow now private, well, yes, the owners, the people that went out of their way to get something, to get a private benefit for themselves by taking public trust land out of the lake, yes, those people do have a duty in their permit to maintain those structures. But that doesn't mean that the structures are theirs and that people can't do what they want. Are we going to start regulating like what kind of boats people can use on Lake Michigan? Because, you know, if they're close to a structure and they hit, they could break and they could fall apart, and that could put our first responders at danger. The idea that I can't climb a structure that's public, and it is public, it is on public land, is crazy. And it just seems to me like this is just the next step in a village and an attorney that are doing everything they can for private benefit. You know, the attorney's job here is not to protect like the corporation or to avoid public exposure, but really to ensure compliance with the law. And over the 2 years, we've fenced off 205 Sheridan and said, you can't go there because it's a private construction site. Now the fences are going to be coming down. And there is a beautiful, not at all dangerous in any stretch of the imagination, flat patio that has been built out over the waters of Lake Michigan. It is completely public. The idea that the public can somehow be told that that can't be used by them, it's their land, is ridiculous. And it just seems to me like another step at trying to add state power to private interest. And that's a real problem. And people have sent you a letter that someone obtained from the IDNR from just a couple of years ago, 1077 Sheridan, where they stuck signs out onto the structure, out into the lake, saying that it was private property, no trespassing. And the IDNR specifically called them out and said, you can't do that. You can't claim this as private land. Take down those signs. You've seen the letter, and I'm happy to give you the rest of the IDNR review on this matter if you'd like. But those are public structures, publicly accessible. The idea that you're trying to say something different now is a problem.
Thank you. Public comment? Anyone on this side? Hang on. Thank you.
Thank you, President Dearborn. My name is Lori Morse, and I don't live in Winnetka. I think it's useful when we deal with lakefront issues that all of our municipal councils, not just Winnetka, remembers that the lake belongs to everyone, and that the legislation that you're considering tonight, it's not ready for prime time yet. I disagree with Councilor Friedman about the ownership of the breakwaters, but it's not my role to debate that here tonight. I will say that keeping it simple, all of these structures, and you've got dozens and dozens of them that have IDNR permits that have rock breakwaters or groins, as you've been saying, and all of a sudden you're worried about your rocks in the water? What is this? Think about it as council members. Why are you worried about rocks and people climbing on them when you've got more than 24 of these rock buildings into the lake? I agree with Councilor Myers. They're an attractive nuisance. It's terrible. You have the power in the local authority to not allow these things to be built. The IDNR and the Army Corps permits them, but they can only go forward if the municipal local authorities also approve. So you have a problem that you haven't stopped, not you personally, but councils in general. And the safety issue is not something that you can address now. So be very careful with your wording. I want to move from the safety issue to the point that's very important to the public, which is the trespassing issue. I couldn't agree more that your public safety department needs guidance yesterday on how to deal with the landowner who calls and says, there's somebody sitting on my beach. Come and get them and give them a ticket. And I'm going to make it really, really simple because I think that the document that you're looking at now has got it a little backward, okay? A very wise public safety person from Winnetka has told me a number of years ago that the way you deal with this is, can that upland owner, because he doesn't own the beach, does the upland owner, can he prove to you and to your public safety department that he owns the areas that you're discussing in this document? I don't agree with Peter. Can the guy who's going to call public safety, and I agree there shouldn't be individual addresses in anything like this, so Bridget's point is well taken. Can that guy prove? It's not your job
Lori,
to figure out.
Lori, can you wrap it up? We're at 3 minutes.
Okay, so my point is, I don't think it's the council's job. I don't think that just because someone is elected to put a structure like this into the lake, that you should be tasked with deciding what's private and what isn't. Make the person who's complaining prove they own whatever it is.
Okay.
And if they can do it, I would accept it. But right now, I feel like it's my right to go anywhere because they can't prove they own it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Irene?
I was having a little trouble hearing what Lori was saying. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
She's, yeah.
Okay. Maybe it was just too close. Okay. Good evening. Irene Smith, a 40-year resident of Winnetka. First of all, Bob, thank you for saying you're not voting on this tonight. We were assuming that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we might have all left had you said that at the very beginning.
Sorry.
But here we are. This past Sunday, only 2 days ago, I discovered the proposal for lakefront policy guidelines online. I would like you to table this proposal, and here's why. I believe this policy was written for one property owner only, Mr. Ishbia. In fact, the address 205 Sheridan appears 3 times in the policy guidelines. Why would policy guidelines be written for only one property? And thank you, Bridget, for mentioning that too. You are a deliberative body, and I think you need to deliberate this awkward set of guidelines. In the interest of transparency, shouldn't the public have been notified? Shouldn't we have had the opportunity to give input before the vote, which now we have, and I thank you. The proposal hints at secrecy, What was the hurry? Please fully consider and discuss this new document before you vote. Maybe have a study session, let the public in on the plan. I would hope you would reconsider who owns what at the shoreline. Are the groins really private property? When would we be trespassing, and when would we be following the doctrine of public trust? I refer you here to a letter you all received from Chris Friesheim, who's back there, which addresses some of the incongruities of these new guidelines as compared to current village policy. Will these guidelines become an ordinance? Will the Winnetka Police be expected to follow them? So many questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. Other public comment over here? John? Come on up, John. Nope, sorry.
Thank you. John Root. Please withdraw the proposed lakefront guidelines. The Lakefront Policy Guidelines memo submitted by village staff attempts to encapsulate public trust doctrine and property rights on the lakeshore. One item that is missing from the memo is Statute 615 ILCS 5 that gives the IDNR the authority to fix the boundary of Lake Michigan. The IDNR defines the boundary as the ordinary high water mark or toe of the bluff, whichever is more restrictive. There are three possible public-private lake boundaries: toe of the bluff, the ordinary high water mark, or the calm water line. I believe that the Illinois courts will sort this boundary out at some time in the future. I just don't want the village of Winnetka to be listed as a defendant in that test case. The safety hazard created by armor stone groins is the reason given for issuance of the policy guidelines. Resolution of public-private boundaries is not needed to address this safety hazard. All that is needed is the adoption of an ordinance prohibiting public from climbing on armor stone groins. The village has jurisdiction for such an ordinance, and such an ordinance would protect the health and safety of the public. As Mr. Friedman pointed out before, your authority goes out 3 miles, not only, for ordinances, but for police powers. The village should not involve itself in issues of property rights to stone groins on the lakeshore, but should leave such issues to the IDNR. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Come on up. Chuck, you want to come up?
Chuck Dowding, 968 Elm. Thank you very much for waiting here with us this evening. I'm really happy that we're having this discussion, though, because for a long time I've been concerned about needing some guidance for us beach walkers to navigate the beach without being cited, as Ted was. I'm concerned that I really don't know after reading this guideline where that really is. I think it's important that I be able to know that so I can walk without fear along the lake. I'm also struck tonight about maybe a concern about process. In other difficult matters like this, we have a study session and we have 2 readings, and that doesn't seem to be followed here. And I think, given some of the concerns that have been raised here this evening, it's not a very clear-cut and straightforward definition of what is public and private. While there are a number of things in this document that I think are somewhat inaccurate, I just want to concentrate on one, and that was the statement that the village agrees with the IDNR that stone groins privately built along Lake Michigan pursuant to permits issued by IDNR and the Army Corps are private property. Well, there's legal decisions and also administrative law written by IDNR that are contrary to this statement. So I would like to know on what are the foundational documents on which Winnetka has come to this conclusion? None of these documents are provided in any of this information that we've been given, yet there are opinions that are made. So the decision to deny Loyola's request to fill in Lake Michigan, Judge Aspen discerned that the public trust doctrine strongly disfavors any attempts by the state to surrender valuable public resources to a private entity. Secondly, the benefit or surrender that to the benefit of a private interest or to relinquish the state's power over a public resource. This is all contained in this book that describes the many, many, many legal documents that describe this particular issue and how that what belongs to the state belongs to the state. It does not belong to some person who builds something out into Lake Michigan. Secondly, the administrative law stipulation by the IDNR that is in the letter that was written to the homeowner that I think you've all received copies of, relative to his attempt to portray
Chuck,
this.
you're going to need to wrap up here.
Okay,
shortly. Thank
his
you.
attempt to portray this as private, the state wrote to him that this permit does not convey title to the permittee or recognize title of the permittee to any submerged or other lands.
Okay.
Now, in case you're wondering what submerged means lakeward of the ordinary high water mark, and in the case of 205 Sheridan is 582 is defined in its permit that was approved by Winnetka.
Okay, Chuck.
It is not your feet are wet because
Okay.
you are on private property.
Thank you. Other public comment? Come on up. Thank you.
I've worked with this village for about 35 to 40 years, all with no financial gain for the public interest in public land. I want you to know that the village owns 3 miles into the water, into the water. Groins are on public land. They are not private, it's public. If you allow steps 150 feet past the bluff line, you should make a ordinance that says the steps need to be at the bluff line because we have to swim out to get to those steps at 582, which is what the lake usually is. This is not the best work that I've seen us do in the village. My daughter had 2 heart surgeries and I came here tonight not knowing I would be here so late, but I think it's wrong and inaccurate and that we have to have, my mom said, advice. 1, we need a study session. What we see is not even close. We have the right to walk on accreted sand and the rocks as they're both built on public land. The public is 12,998 other residents. This even looks like it's specifically written for one address mentioned 3 times. Never seen a guideline like this. I laughed, but now I'm not. The water line, we have no water lot line ordinances that have been vetted. We had no warning of this until this week. It appears that we, and Peter, I'm sorry, but we're privatizing the beaches and we're not following what's best for the public. It is so many errors, I can't say it in 3 minutes. Please take out the addresses. Thank you, Bridget. I probably read my earlier letter. Thank you all for the work you do, and I really think you need a study session.
Thank you. Other comment from the back there?
I'm Chris Schriesheim, a frequent correspondent at this point, and I've learned a lot about the lakefront from the village study session materials from 2023, which were excellent, comprehensive, reflected the input and actual physical presence in Winnetka of true experts from the IDNR, the Army Corps of Engineers, Open Lands, and other sources of authority. And the fact that these guidelines were sent out 2 days ahead of time with no expert input, riddled with errors, overstatements, references to a private address, and are just so flawed is really disturbing. and I'm not trying to be rude, but when I read through the 2023 materials, the village was just on the cusp of realizing that its jurisdiction extends into the lake. 2 years later, to make the leap into saying that the village can determine what's public and what's private on the lake, disrupting actually centuries of public trust doctrine authority, is shocking. I think if you went to court, you'd be laughed out of court. Winnetka has 12,000 people, and it's not credible. I'm not trying to be angry, but I'm just so surprised. And I wish, Mr. Friedman, that you could make a principled distinction in the types of fill that go into the lake. You're saying sand is a type of fill that's always public, that is public. That's why people can access our artificially built beaches. That's the Brundage Passage you cited in 2023. But somehow if fill is rocks, it's not public. That makes no sense, and I don't think there's support for that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Has the village considered, now that the lakefront owner's lawsuit has been dismissed, that they've kicked another hornet's nest? If I were the IDNR dealing with a potentially rogue jurisdiction, saying put signs on your breakwaters saying they're private, we think we can privatize breakwaters, et cetera, why would the IDNR ever issue a breakwater permit in Winnetka, knowing that it's a rogue jurisdiction that's overstepped the bounds of its authority and is not going to abide by or recognize firmly established state policy that goes along with the permit conditions for these breakwaters?
Chris,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Come on up.
Joanna Karatzis. I live on Provident. I think when Chuck Dowding was talking, he was on the verge of enlightening all of us with something really important. And I hope he sends his notes in to you, you all read them, and maybe post them on Nextdoor. And, I think it would be to the benefit of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to speak? Going once, twice? Okay, we'll close public comment, and we'll bring it back up here to the trustees for any thoughts, comments, reflections. Kirk, you want to start?
No,
Oh, you don't want to start? Or does that mean you have no?
I don't want to start.
You don't want to start? Wow. All right, Trustee Handler, how about you being remote?
Sure. Well, I guess I can just take a moment and reiterate the comments that I sent when I reacted, or my reaction to this draft of the policy. I had expressed concern about in any policy document specific homes being mentioned or any specific individuals, which wasn't the case, but that's just a blanket statement. I was concerned, or I would like to see a change such that we are, as I mentioned, making sure we're very factual in what we're saying people can and can't do, and eliminate some anecdotal information about things that we understand residents have asked or there might be concerns. I don't think that kind of narrative has place in a policy document. But again, I've also expressed some concerns about the concept of the signage. As I've thought about it, would we put signs on all 88 pieces of property? Because if one owner wants signs, but then the one next door doesn't, and people would traverse the lake, that could cause even more confusion than perhaps just publicizing what the the policy or guidelines are, or policy/laws are in our community. So again, going back to my original comments, I would like to see this clarified for the community and for lakefront owners, so we're all on the same page. But I do believe this document needs a lot of tightening up and clarity for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Orsic?
I also agree it needs a lot of tightening up. I think we all know that. Some people have said some very interesting things and beyond what I had already been thinking about. And I do wonder if something along the lines of what Trustee Myers was saying might be prudent rather than us making a decision about what is public and what is private, and whether or not we would be inviting litigation. I mean, we're probably inviting litigation either way. It seems like that's how everything goes, but it needs a lot of work.
Okay, fair enough. Trustee Dahlman?
So for the record, I didn't read this. Maybe I read things differently. I didn't think that we were snapping the line saying what's public or private or opening ourselves to litigation. I mean, I don't, I think this is our, if residents want to go into court and seek a declaratory judgment on this issue, they can, right? I think we're trying in a very murky area, based on the case law, which is very factually specific, trying to snap the line and saying that groin structures are privately owned structures for the permittee who received them, not that the underlying land is somehow converted to private. So I didn't see this as opening us up to litigation, but trying to provide guidance to what will inevitably be people walking the beach, potentially running into conflicts and trying to provide guidance. If that's not helpful, we certainly don't have to do that. But I think we are trying to provide guidance to our first responders who will be called. But I think some of the clarifications that Peter's talked about are necessary. I agree that the address is not necessary, but I guess I didn't see this. Again, I'm the lone voice. I don't see this as opening us up to litigation in the sense that we're just trying to provide guidance to to residents of what they can do.
Fair enough. Trustee Apatow?
I won't go over I agree with the comments by Kim and Kirk, Bridget.
Kirk didn't make comments.
I knew what he was.
Kirk only asked.
I knew what he was thinking, though. No, I'm just kidding. There's nothing murky here. I think we were trying, in an effort to try and give guidance to our public safety officials. We may have rushed something. We shouldn't have rushed it. And I saw it recently. I think the one thing that's great about this council is that we own up and we figure it out. We'll get it done right. This is an amazing community. And whether we're talking about solar, whether we're talking about the lake, people really care and they come out. And you brought up some very good points. It is, there is no agenda. There's no financial gain for these residents. So I listen to them intently, and I hope we all do. I know we all do. And we greatly appreciate, no matter what the subject is, that you come out and are passionate about it. You do your homework, and you're really, we have one smart community. So thank you all.
Trustee Myers?
Just two more comments. One is I tend to agree with Kim on the signage, right? I see it as challenging. I totally understand why, right? We want to provide clarity, right? But I see a challenge in terms of, as you said, one resident wants it, one resident doesn't want it. Number one, and number two, the water will change, right? As through a storm, through just natural change over the years. So are we now obligating the village every time it moves, a foot? We got to run out and we got to move the signs, right? And I think that what is the objective is clarity and trying to avoid conflicts. It could end up just maybe adding confusion. So I think we probably need to think about how we do that. The other point, I definitely believe that we have an obligation in the village to provide direction to our public safety folks that we do not think it's safe to be climbing on groins. However, if somebody builds a groin and then carves a cement path in it and builds a deck out there, well, now all of a sudden the safety issue is not really there. So, you know, I view our responsibility as a safety responsibility. I get a little uncertain when that safety issue is not there. And that's something that I think I would want to see more clarity on.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Okay. I do have a question or two for Peter.
Okay.
And then I have a couple of thoughts I'll share.
I'm ready.
So how does our interpretation of the state law, or whatever we want to call it, differ, or if it differs at all, from other communities within Illinois on the lake? And then how does, and maybe this is too technical, but how does the state of Illinois' interpretation of where private and public property meet differ from neighboring states, such as like Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana?
So the first part is hard to answer because I probably don't know what all the different communities. As far as I know, we're consistent with other communities along the lake, or, you know, there's other lakes in the state that are not North Shore communities. We have other lakes in Illinois. As to the second question, tell me, as I said, when I talked, the Wisconsin and Michigan have different rules. Wisconsin has our rule, which is the normal water line, and Michigan, for purposes of public trust doctrine, Michigan says, regardless, that there are two different lines. There's a property line at the normal water line, but the public trust doctrine goes up to the ordinary high water mark. So Michigan has that rule, Wisconsin does it, Illinois doesn't. So there are differences.
Got it. So full transparency, and I talked with Kristen earlier today, I walked into my understanding of this topic thinking initially and incorrectly that we're establishing the rules of what is public versus private land. And now that we're sitting here, it's coming to me much clearer now that we are trying to interpret the laws that are out there to at least establish whether it be public safety or just our interpretation of these public rules or laws and how to enforce them, right? Because ultimately we are the local referee when a property owner claims that there's trespass or another resident claims that they didn't trespass. And this is a really, I think murky was the word that's been used. I feel much better understanding our role here. I mean, my words to Kristen earlier were I think it's just fascinating that here we are, a small community of 12,000 people trying to interpret or to provide guidance on what is public versus private property. And I understand now that's not necessarily our goal with this policy tonight, is just to provide the best job we can to interpret whatever it's case law or all the state statutes or laws that are out there, so we can provide proper enforcement and safety or regulation for what is private versus public along the lakeshore. Am I correct with that sort of process or where I'm at right now? Okay, thank you. I do think it's really interesting, and it's something like I find it really interesting that, I respect and I stand behind, or I honor the council that we have as a village, extremely competent team of professionals. But I hear other opinions, strong opinions, and we've seen written comments submitted to the village. I'm like, oh, that seems very logical and true. And to be honest, I'm going to always defer and lean on the recommendation of our council, but I hear all these other comments being raised, and it does raise the question. I do wonder, what is the fact that we are addressing this here in 2025 and that these lakes have been here for hundreds of years, as long as Western civilization came to And as long as we've privatized land, which is, from what I understand, more of a Western understanding of private property ownership rights, that we're still debating this topic, and that we don't have clarity in a state such as ours with a significant body of water. So I'm getting maybe way too philosophical here. It's just, I think my reaction after hearing all the comments tonight, reading the letters that were sent in, now having more personal clarity on this topic is, my feeling is I think we're doing the best job we can with the information we have to be fair and equitable to what the situation is. Whether or not it's right or it's going to stand up if there's lawsuits that come out of this, or that this, let's say, murky topic spurs in the future, I think will be interesting to see it play out. But I would just, as one of multiple voices here, I want to do what's right for the whole community and not just lean on the voices of the few property owners that may be along the lake, although I do want to recognize that they are equal community members within the town of Winnetka. So I want to do what's right. I do understand now and agree with the goal of having a policy to protect the interests of our residents, but I do as well acknowledge that we're doing the best with what we have, and this, there might be different opinions about this.
Well, that's very true. There are definitely different opinions. And this is murky. I'll remind everyone, we just dealt with an issue where our state of Illinois, the scooters, they dealt with low-speed scooters, but they didn't deal with the dangerous scooters. State of Illinois, I think one of the presumptions or the underlying assumptions here is that the state of Illinois has not given us clear direction. We're doing the best we can. Maybe we stubbed our toe a little bit on this one, and as Trustee Abitoff said, we get off the deck, we figure it out. But where we are right now, I think our village attorney has been taking furious notes here. I don't know if that's related to this or something else, but so all related to this. I think he's going to be on the task here. He's heard from the public, passionate people, knowledgeable people. Thank you for being here so late. We're not going to go past 10 o'clock, no way. And the next step will be for him, his firm, to draft something. It will be circulated to trustees initially. Our goal here, for good or for bad, is to consider the draft. After comments come back, it will be posted Friday, the 31st of October. Public will be able to see that. The goal here is to consider that draft for adoption on November 4th. That's kind of where we are. Subject to change, I suppose, but that's the goal, because we feel, I think, generally speaking, that we need some policies in place for the reasons that have been enumerated. So, is everyone okay with that direction that we're going in? Kim, you're okay with that? Okay, that's going to be the direction. And thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to item 12, appointments. We have none. Item 13, closed session. We have none. Item 14, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
And that's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.